Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Sasha Cholkova, and I'm a marketing manager at Witham. Today we'll be talking about managing Microsoft Teams governance and adoption. Just going to cover a few housekeeping items quickly. We are recording the webinar. We are going to try to keep it to about a 45-minute session. We do have a little bit of a demo incorporated into it. We'll save 10 to 15 minutes at the end for your questions. Please don't hold back throughout the webinar. You can enter the questions in the questions pane of the GoToWebinar panel. If we don't get to your questions, we'll address them by email. And with that, I have Daniel and Lamia joining me. So Daniel, if you want to kick it off, we're ready.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon if you're dialing from overseas. My name is Daniel Cohen-Dumani. I'm a partner at Witham, in charge of our digital practice. I've been in technologies for as long as I can remember, over more than 20 years in digital transformation. My expertise span Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Dynamics, all cloud things, and hopefully you won't hold that against me, but I've been working with SharePoint for over 18 years. So I started working with SharePoint when actually nobody could spell the name even. I have a lot of interest in productivity, and obviously the topic of today is Microsoft Teams, which is a tool that drives better productivity. So excited to be here today, and thanks all for joining us. With that, Lamia, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lamia Sadek. I am a project manager and business analyst here at Witham. I've had about 8 years of consulting in SharePoint and beyond the Microsoft space. I am a Microsoft service adoption specialist, so today I'm going to talk about some concepts as well as Sasha mentioned, we're going to do some demonstration. And I'm really passionate about teamwork engagement. Right now, of course, we're dealing with difficult situations, so always trying to find creative ways to engage my team while still being productive. Hashtag new normal. And on my spare time, I enjoy making fresh pasta at home. That's a fun fact about me. And of course, thank you everyone for joining us today.
We're going to have to share a recipe, Lamia. I
yes.
enjoy as well, making as well.
Oh, you see, I didn't know that. Okay. Nice to know.
So what to expect from today's webinar? One of our goals is to help you understand how to boost adoption of Microsoft Teams. How do you facilitate the creation of teams? That's something we hear a lot from our clients and prospective clients is how do we put a process in place? How do we automate? How do we make sure that the teams that gets created have the right naming convention? And how do we make sure that people can actually find those teams, right? It's not that easy sometimes. And also think about security, right? Including guest access, data access, retention policy. Those are all common aspect of governance and challenges that come with using Microsoft Teams. So with that, we are going to start with our first poll of the day. We would love to hear from the audience who is already using Microsoft Teams. And we have a few answers for you all. So if you could please answer. So either you're using it, you're not, but planning to, maybe you have no plans. And I'm sure many of you are using competitive or competing products. And there's a lot of products that may compete with Teams or directly or indirectly, right? Teams is a broader platform. So if you use Zoom, that competes with the meeting portion of Teams. If you're using Slack, that's the conversation aspect. And Team is that overreaching platform. So it's good to hear that 70% or 75% now of the people are already in Teams. Some are thinking about deployment. So I'm glad you're here because governance is obviously critical to think before. And some of you have no plans. So hopefully we'll help you, we'll convince you that maybe you should consider using the Teams platform. All right. So we also have a second poll right off the bat here. And that's more geared toward understanding governance, right? Do you have a plan in place? Do you don't? And if you do you need it? And maybe some people don't even know what governance is, right? So don't be shy. You can say it. we won't take that against you. Obviously, governance is not something that comes along for everybody here. So the results are that half of the people said they don't have a plan. And that's something that Lamia is going to talk at length about the need, how important it is to have a plan. And I encourage you, as a big takeaway from today's webinar, is to ensure that you takeaway for you will be, we need a plan, and here's the component of my plan, and this is why it's important. All right, so let's delve in here. So why teams and why governance is so important, right? So when you think about teamwork, which is sort of this new term that's been familiar with us for about a year or two now, the landscape has changed. And I think that the time we live in 2020, with this pandemic, has emphasized the need of change, right? We collaborate more than ever, right? If you ask people in your organization, they're going to tell you that they're mostly working on teams. They're spending a lot of time collaborating. And I can tell you that now that we're all stuck at home, we're even spending more time collaborating, right? So dramatic increase of collaboration over the past few years, and that's been driven by technology. Not only we're collaborating, we're doing that internally and externally and remotely, as we all been doing for the last 3 months. People need to connect, to communicate across organization, outside time, different time zone, in different location, and often with outside parties as well, your vendors, your customers, your partners, the people that you interact with a lot. Employees in workforce and organization are very diverse. People have different expectations, different skill set, different abilities. What you see with product like Teams or modern teamwork technology is the adoption varies greatly based on generation, right? And without being politically incorrect here, it's easy to say that younger folks tend to adopt those products much faster than elder generation. That's natural, right? And with the diverse workforce, you need to take in consideration that some folks may be very used to digital communication when some may not. And then, lastly, I think employee engagement is critical, right? We all know that we need to focus on ensuring that your workforce is engaged. The best companies out there are the ones that are able to engage their workforce, able to get them to communicate, and they will perform better. And there's a lot of statistics that show that across the spectrum. When you introduce Teams, it is all about changing the way people work. If you have not used it, if some of you that are considering moving, if you're already using it, you probably witnessed that. Introducing or deploying Team is about changing the way your organization works. Team is a collaboration tool that support, the overreaching digital transformation. It's more than than product. It's actually a set of product that introduce different way of collaborating, right? Many of you probably still use email as the first means of sharing information with other people. Team introduced this concept of communication, of tagging, of posting content, and to do that in an often public forum, right? So you have to change your behavior, right, to be able to be more open and transparent. And when you think about the successful adoption of Microsoft Teams, it is all about a change of behavior. There's a continuum, there's a process to it to make sure it's successful. So Team is the hub for teamwork. It's pull for adoption and change management. That's ACM is the acronym for adoption and change management. But when you think about all those capabilities, it pulls email, calendar, your files, your meeting, your calling, your community. It pull all of this into a unified user interface, which has a lot of data and potentially analytics behind the scene that requires thinking about security and, of course, governance, right? So the successful rollout of Microsoft Teams is about thinking about continuous adoption and change management. You're done once. If you've done your governance plan and think you are done, you're mistaken. The governance plan is the start of the journey, And you have to think about this process of continuous adoption and change management. Why? Simply because Teams is a product that's ever changing. And every cloud product out there requires this continuous adoption and change management. Teams roll out new feature, or Microsoft roll out new feature on a monthly basis, right? Sometimes weekly basis. So I think that, you know, you need to make sure that you're able to keep pace with those and communicate to your end user community, adjust your governance plan accordingly as you roll out those features, and make sure that you don't introduce, you know, security concerns as well. So with that, Lamia, why don't you talk to us about sort of the change management curve and how to mitigate resistance, which is a key challenge as you roll out technology like Teams.
Yeah, thank you. I can't stress enough that change is all about the people, right? So managing change is really about mitigating resistance. So think of it this way. If you're just gonna flip the switch on Microsoft Teams and maybe just one day people open up their laptop and all of a sudden they have Microsoft Teams, they're gonna ask a lot of questions. Whether you're a small organization or a large organization, you wanna prepare and plan accordingly. I remember, Daniel, when we transitioned maybe 3 years ago and we were transitioning between Skype and Teams, and whenever we messaged you on Skype, Daniel was like, just go to Teams. And it is an effort, right? It is an effort, but if done properly, then it can be successful. So what you see here is essentially a curve, as Daniel mentioned. And with change, you may experience a decline in productivity and an increase in resistance if you don't communicate early on and properly. Let's say if you communicate through the proper channels, whether it's an executive sponsor, as an example, you can work towards anticipating change, right? And mitigating resistance, anticipating and mitigating resistance. We all know that it does happen, resistance does happen, but we can work towards that and anticipate it. So in the first top region for comfort and security, that's really when everyone is productive, they're continuing normal work behavior. They have that. Right now we're dealing with, of course, this pandemic, but of course, things are a bit sensitive, but we can get to that comfort and security level if that communication and the plan is in place. We don't want, of course, the worry and uncertainty, which can happen. We don't want too much distraction and productivity loss and worst case turnover, right? So the degree of impact really on resistance and just your organization is really dependent on how effective is your plan. It's not just about creating a plan and just throwing something out there and saying that we have something. It's really about how effective is it? Is it continuous, as well as Daniel mentioned? And if you think about it, if you have multiple projects, maybe you're throwing Microsoft Teams and Workday and a bunch of things all at once to your employees, that's also another layer to think about, right? It's not just about launching Microsoft Teams and expecting everyone to adopt it. It's all those other layers as well to communicate early, because adoption is difficult, but you can work through it. So
and Lamia, when you think about what's that zone, the flight risk zone, that's,
yes,
we advise organization not to get in that area, right? To do everything they can not to get in the red zone, right?
It's dangerous, yeah. I mean, it can come from, like I said, if you're flipping the switch, people, or maybe people hear about something that's coming new without their supervisors or sponsors communicating early. That's called a rumor, as we know. So you don't want to get to that. Plus, change happening over and over with Workday and all these other tools without that proper communication in place and plan. And if so, in reality, right, each impacted employee has his or her own current and future state. Often we think about change as an organizational level, but the individual is really truly part of the journey to adoption. For the current state, whether individual organizations, really about how I do my job today, but the future state is how will I do my job after the change is implemented. If we don't support that transition state, then our future state is not going to look like anything we expected. We are probably anticipating, okay, we put a plan in place, we really expected X, Y, and Z outcome, but it didn't happen. Sometimes that could be resistance, people using other tools. We have Microsoft Teams and people are using Zoom or Google Hangout, and that's a big no-no, and we hear that from organizations. We definitely don't want that. So you have to be able to speak on the need for change and really communicate to individuals what's in it for me, how is it going to impact my job, how I'm working with people, and why should I care? Because at the end of the day, individuals pretty much decide whether their level of engagement and how their participation level in Microsoft Teams, right? So with all that in mind, there's a concept of human return on investment. It goes back to change is about people. What we want to be able to assess is three things that this comes from studies from ProSci specifically. How quickly are people up and running on the new system, right? How many people are actually demonstrating buy-in, and how well are these individuals performing? Of course, there's metrics and things that we can look at, but really to be able to assess the human return on investment, it does require a plan in place.
So Lamia, I like this slide because it talks about transition state, and I think,
yes, yeah.
Is it true that organizations should try to minimize the state of transition, make it as short as possible?
It's not, yeah, I mean, short can be good depending on the effort for sure. You also don't want to spend too much time because you do want to get people's feedback as well, right? You want to get assessments and you want to get the metrics and their feedback instead of taking all this long time to plan and not get get a reaction and see if it actually works, right? You need to test these things out. So it just depends, but in general, I would say yeah.
So that's a good point. So what you were saying earlier is there's an organization change management, but there's also an individual. And
Absolutely.
every individual may move at their own pace. And I think every organization should be conscious of that.
Yes, and there's, of course, at the department or even within your, let's say communication can happen from executive sponsor, that's the organizational level, then individual usually happens from like your direct reports, your supervisors, right? So there's different layers that can happen there. Yeah.
So what's the right way to take this on? Is there the right path to drive adoption?
There can be tailored paths, of course. Of course, there are some key standards, and right here we have a teamwork assessment. As Microsoft partners, we have a teamwork assessment service to kind of help with just business continuity during these times, but also just beyond and the strategic planning of things. So we can assess your current situation. So going back to Daniel, we can figure out what would work well for you, discover the art of possible for teamwork, as well as building the plan. So here at Witham, we really, we spend some time understanding your organizational culture and what your needs are, right? So if we look at some of the offerings in the following. Yep. So we have a couple of different options here where we can sit down and talk about any concerns, or maybe you're transitioning to a different calling system, right? From maybe Cisco to, I don't know, to Microsoft Teams. So we can sit down and talk about that. Teams adoption, solutions, meetings in general. So throughout these different phases, at the end, we'll build a plan and talk about next steps, et cetera. But all of this can be tailored, they're flexible, and we can provide recommendations based on your needs.
That's great. And I think that the middle part is very important too, because, you know, people don't know what they don't know. right?
Right.
And when you introduce technologies such as Microsoft Teams that are so capable of transforming the way you work, having a way to demonstrate to business stakeholders through either a workshop or even an immersion, this is the art of possible. Hey, did you know you can even do those things, right, with technology? And it's with Teams or others, but essentially, this art of the possible enlighten people. I've done a lot of those workshops, and I remember, and I enjoy so much when you see a light bulb in someone's face, right? Oh my God, I get it. Now I understand what that could be used for. Is so enlightening. So the art of the possible is a critical way to enlighten people, so that you can build a plan that is tailored to their concept and understanding about how to apply what's possible to their organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the art of possible, I also enjoy as an agile enthusiast, the building out use case scenarios, right? Really thinking about what are those personas, what are those needs, and also demonstrating some things in real time during that phase as well. So
good point.
That's
Yeah,
what
so
I enjoy the most.
Documenting those use cases before you jump in team is so critical, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's obvious. We know that it's a better solution, that it's going to make people more productive, but let's define those use cases. Let's define how to get the most out of this tool.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to governance. For those of you that didn't know what governance is, we're going to enlighten you in the next few slides here in a few minutes. So what is a governance plan? A governance is about enforcement and consistency in driving better adoption, right? So, you have to have a plan that describe who can create a team, right? Who has the power to go in and say, I need a new workspace to collaborate, right? Is it everybody? Is it controlled? Do you have a process in place to do that? Is there any naming convention? Are we going to use Teams for meetings too? Is it just chatting, right? And what's the thoughts about adoption and change management? How are we going to train people, right? So all of the things that you need to think about, are we enabling guest access? Is there apps that we want to integrate? What happened with content retention, discovery, e-discovery, data loss prevention? All those great feature of the Microsoft 365 platform needs to be also thought in the context of Microsoft Team. And never forget the need for training, right? And there's a lot of tools out there, self-training. Microsoft has something called the Learning Pathways, which is a tool that you can deploy on your Office 365 tenant that it gives you short-lived video, right, that enlighten people. You can create your own and embed them there, but also think about continuous education. We talked about that earlier, right? So Lamia, when you do governance plan, do you create a plan? How's the plan put together?
It's going back to it's all about the people as well, right? So it's spending that time and that care with different entities within an organization, right? So we can, of course, we have best practices based on other organizations, but it's really about sitting down with a set of individuals and going back to what's in it for me. So different individuals have different needs and different concerns. So like, for example, employees on the right-hand side, it's make it easy for me to get my work done fast, right? It's not, they don't want too many clicking of things or just, that's an example. Employees, business wants to accomplish their business goals. Security officers, care about data leaks and breaches, legal, retention. So having these individuals in a room with you, or representatives or individuals that are well versed in these different topics, when coming up with the plan and having those discussions, that's the most powerful. Is also not siloing those discussions, right? Because you want everyone in the same room, ideally.
Right.
So, yeah.
So governance plan is about policy and procedures, right?
Yeah.
It's about how we're going to train people. It's getting feedback from a lot of people in your organization. Very important to think about, getting the input from your employees, from the business, from both sides, right? The people that's going to use the tool but also the business objective, and make sure this is not just yet another IT project, right? Deploying teams is
Exactly.
more than that. It involves a new way of working, right? So gathering input from a lot of different places. And by the way, when we do those teamwork assessment, we go through this exercise of gathering your business objectives, talking to employees, getting input from IT, legal, and security, so that we can have a good path forward. So as you think about, governance, one of the challenges is how do you enforce it, right? Because at the end, you can have the best plan in the world. If you can enforce it and make sure it's actually being followed, then you fail, right? So we're introducing the concept today about why should you consider automating your team's governance, right? And we're going to demonstrate some tools that we've built here at Rhythm Digital to help with that. So the first reason is consistency. You want to ensure the teams that you create are following the right naming convention, that are easy to find, right? Because if not, you're going to have teams name all around, the world, and you don't know what's what, right? The name is so critical. You also want to make sure that the right people have access to teams, right? And you want to make sure that maybe some teams you create need to have separate set of owners that are predefined, right? And you can rely on people to just follow the plan. You want to automate that. And of course, you want to facilitate the team's adoption with templates. Right? Templates is a very interesting concept that has been sort of left behind, but that Microsoft is working on as well. Next, you want to empower end user. End user needs to be empowered so that they feel like, hey, I'm working on the new project. I don't want to be burdened to ask someone to create a team. What if I can just request it? And that request will go through a process. And once approved, my teams is provisioned based on a template with the right naming convention, right? That is really empowering you end user. They feel like, hey, IT didn't put a burden on me and say no self-service team creation. I gave you something in between where you're still empowered to do it. And more importantly, for medium to large organization, if you centralize teams creation or centralize a lot on the team's governance, you have a huge administrative burden. So one of the benefit of automating that is reducing the manual administration, right? IT will not be in the business of creating teams and fielding requests. Those will be sort of automated behind the scene as the need of the business, either by request, or you can also think about full automation, right, of teams creation for every project you work on, for instance, right? So that will allow to make sure that when a team is created, you have the right approval. For instance, if you're creating a team for your HR department, maybe your HR manager should be the person that approve it, right? Shouldn't be IT. Maybe you delegate that approval process down the chain, so you can put in place those process in place and automate some of your governance. All right, so with that, we're going to jump into a demonstration. So we're going to show you a team's automated governance solution. I'm going to talk about the challenge in more detail and the requirements of this solution. So from a challenge standpoint, if you think yourself about a user, you're a member of a lot of teams, but you can't find where to go. That's common, right? Because the standard user interface is a list of teams and not sure where to go. You don't have a way to find the teams for IT or the teams for HR or the teams for this committee or things like that. So there's no right way of classifying or creating a classification engine for your teams.
And Daniel, I want to say, and usually the outcome is people using other tools, right?
Right.
End up leaving Microsoft Teams and chatting on Hangout or doing other things at work outside. So, yeah,
yep. That's a good
one
point.
of the outcomes.
One of the other challenge is that, everyone, if you let self-service teams creation on, everyone will start creating teams. Hey, I want to collaborate.
Yes,
let's create a team, right? And maybe they didn't know there was already something that existed, right? So that's the wild, wild west. And it ends up being a team sprawl. There's like teams everywhere, and now you can't just find what it means, and you have overlapping teams and things like that. And then, some of the challenge we've heard from clients is, hey, we've turned off self-service teams creation. My IT department is in charge, and guess what? They're busy and they don't have time to handle that, and my teams never gets created. I have to send an email. There's no process around that. So the requirements of this solution that we built is to allow to manage the requests and life cycles of the team's creation, to minimize the manual labor for creating teams, to allow delegated approval process, to support templating with naming convention, prefix, suffix, automatic numbering, whatever you can think of from a naming convention, and then advanced classification using some term sets and way to then discover those teams, right? So the solution we built is based on an open source project that Microsoft has released about a month and a half ago, called the Request a Team. It's open source, so it's not finished. It's a toolkit to start. So I'm gonna now move on in showing you how this actually works. So let me switch my screen here. Here we are. So I am logged into Microsoft Teams, and we've created what we call a team governance workspace. This team governance is accessible to everybody, right? And it's, if you're a member, all you can do is a few things. You can request a new team, or you can discover existing team. That discover functionality, by the way, is not yet available. We're still building that, but I'll talk about it as a future enhancement we're working on. But the essential use case we want to demonstrate today is this concept of, I'm a user here, I don't have a team, but I'm working on this project for my marketing department, and I need a team. So I'm going to click here, build new. And the system is taking me for a wizard. So the first thing is, what is your team visibility? And as you probably all know, a team can be private, a team can be public, a team can be organization-wide, and there's a new level of visibility that's coming, which is private discoverable. That's not yet available, or it's not on every tenant yet. That will allow you to discover a private team and request to join, right? So there'll be more aspect. The solution will look at what you've enabled in visibility in your tenant. I'm saying, hey, I'm going to create a public team here. Anyone in my organization can join that team. Then I'm going to pick a name, and that's where the fun begins. So I'm working on project get new clients in marketing. And we have a new initiative here. We want to get new clients for our business. We need a team to collaborate. The first step is, hey, let's make sure that doesn't exist already. Is that team available? Is that name? Yeah, it's available. The system went out and checked the database of teams, and it's available. I'm going to describe it. This is a new team to work on this new initiative to get new client for the firm. Very exciting. And of course, I need to say why. Why do you need a team, right? Because someone is going to approve it. It's not going to be automatically approved. I need a special area to bring in colleagues and from a lot of different departments, right? So the reason I'm creating a new team is, hey, we don't have a cross-functional team across my business, and I need one. There's a good reason. Now, who's going to be involved in that team? I'm going to say my colleague Lamia here and myself here. And I'm going to put a few members here. I'm going to invite John and a few more people, right? So I can invite a few members here on the fly. Next is the system will say, okay, well, here's your team. It's public. It's using a standard template. Here are the owners here, and here's what it's for, and let's submit it. When it's submitted, it's going to go through an approval process. And we'll talk later about how this solution is built, but as you will imagine, it's using all the capability of the Microsoft Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate, and I'll get into detail later on. Here's my team here. It's in submitted stage, and you see that some other one requests here have different status. So this previous request I made was created. This one is still in creation mode. This one is pending approval, etc. Right? So you see things are in different stage. At some point, the workflow process behind the scene will kick off for this team to be pending approval. Now, look what happened here. In my general tab, something was posted in here. I have two ways to approve. You know, the traditional old workflow fashion is I send an email. Well, this solution does not have email, right? It's more team-based. So if you go here in the Teams channel, that is reserved for administrator, right? I'm an administrator here. I was asked to now approve that team creation. I can come here and approve it. I can also, as an admin only, go back to my request a team here, reload the application, and go to the approval tab. In a minute. Always happen with the demonstrations. Somehow you guys don't see that, but my demo tenant here is on the West Coast, so there may be a few issues here. I'm going to refresh that. And in the meantime, if it doesn't work, I'll go back and approve from the other channel too, right? So the app is loading here. Should be loading soon. Anyway, in the meantime, let me go through the post here and approve it. So I'm going to approve from here and say this is approve or reject, right? So you can decide what you want to do here. And Lamia, in the meantime, if you can look, if you can access it, because it seems that maybe I'm having an issue here.
Yeah, I think you are. Yeah, I'm able to get to it, so just
Good.
give it some time.
Let me try again. So now this request has been approved. So what's happening next? At that point, the system will go in provisioning stage. It's using my template, which is a standard empty template. It's going to go in the system, and now it's in Teams creation process. So if I switch back quickly, this is running a logic app, and you see that here it's running. I'm going to refresh it, and you'll see that there's a new request that's running. So that's the solution running using the Azure Logic Apps toolset, which is like Flow essentially. And it's going through all the things here, all the process of creating the team, adding the owners, etc., right? So it takes about a few minutes to create the team, to put the templates, add the people, send a message. And within about 3-4 minutes, we'll get a notification. In that case, for Teams, I'll be added, so I'll be notified, but also through email, and I'll show you how the email looked like. I can also, from my dashboard here, go out and approve a new team request. Again, I can do it for a message in team, or I can go from here and approve it. I'm actually going to reject that one. This team already exists. We added you to the team, right? The admin say, hey, I found an existing team, no need to create one. You rejected it, but I went back in the system and added you. Now let's take that a little bit further, right? Because, you know, we talk about the need for naming convention and templating. That's critical for Teams adoption. And one thing that we hear a lot is there's not an easy way with Teams out of the box to be consistent in the way a team is created. I'll give you an example here at Rhythm Digital. Every time we start a new client project, we create new teams that has specific number of channels, right? And there's a private channel where we invite our clients to it. So we want to automate this. So what we've done here is those are sample templates, but we created this one called Client Internal. This is to collaborate on a given client, only to be used internally, which means guest access is turned off. That's governance, right? You can't turn it on. There's no power to do that. You have to request external admin access to do that. And it comes with a set of predefined channel, folder structure, and also naming convention. So here's how it works. Same concept. I'm gonna make it private this time. I'm gonna put a name. This is for client. We're working with the Washington Post today, so let's create a team with them. And it's available. I put a description. And I need a team to collaborate with my client internally about this client. Hit next. I'm gonna put a few owners here, same as before. I'm gonna put any member. And now here's what happened. I wanted you to highlight this. I went really fast here. You see here that this team was deemed confidential based on the template. So automatically there'll be label associated with that teams, and if enabled, in that case, Azure Information Protection labeling will be automatically stapled to that team. It's using a template called Client Internal. But more importantly, the name here has the convention. You remember that we put this, and the system said this template we're going to prefix. And if I actually did my job correctly here, I would have said Washington Post here. So let me do that on the fly. Hit next and next. And it's going to create a team. So there's a prefix, in that case, a suffix. And why? Because you want to be able to easily identify that this team is for a client and it's for internal use only. Now, there's other way to do that. You can use keywords, right? So that there's other capability like that. And I hit submit. This will go out for submission. And again, through the same process of approval, etc. So that's the basic of the solution as we've completed it as of today. As I said, we're working on a lot of enhancements. We're already getting a lot of feedback from potential clients, from a lot of people that we presented this to. So let me go back to my slide here and talk about the solution. But before that, I would love to hear from the audience here is, do you feel like you will benefit from automating your governance? So we're going to open the third poll here, and that will help us drive the Q&A section at the end as well. All right, so we're starting the poll now. So again, tell us if you're interested in automating your governance, right? Is it something that will apply to you? Maybe you're not sure, or, you know, a lot of our customers that are maybe on the smaller side say, hey, this is overkill, right? And that's fine, you know. But think about it, there still could be benefit of some automation behind the scene in overall reducing the burden, right? So the majority of the people say either yes or maybe. And interesting to see that no one has solution in place. Now, there's a lot of third-party products, matter probably already 20 or 25 commercially available product. We selected to use an open source solution because we like to have a solution that's highly extensible. So thank you for responding here, and let's talk a little bit about the solution architecture here. So this solution, again, is open source by Microsoft, which means if you want, you can just take it on and deploy it. I'm going to warn you, it's extensive from a deployment standpoint. It requires some good administration skills. The core of the solution is built using Power Apps. And why we're excited about Power Apps is that you can make it your own. You can change the user interface, the user experience. You can add your bells and whistles. If you wanted to add for instance, a field to track a client number coming from your client management system, guess what? With Power Apps, you could do that in an hour, 30 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, right? Very, very quickly. So we like this solution, highly extensible. Power Automate is used for two things: for checking the team existence. You remember when I hit check team existence, that's launching Power Automate. It's using the included version with Office 365. And the approval process is also using Power Automate. Then there's a few SharePoint lists, right? The team requests, the team templates, and the team's classification are SharePoint list, right? So if you classify your team, it will be in the team request list, which is available, so that you can then further discover those teams as well. And lastly, there's a team's creation process, a 90 action step process in Azure Logic Apps. And a lot of people will ask me, well, why Logic Apps, right? And for those that don't know, Logic Apps and Power Automate are one and the same thing. They're just licensed differently. Microsoft last October introduced a new licensing paradigm for Power Automate, where some of the premium connector, which include calling the creation of teams, is now a premium connector and require additional licensing. So the idea of using Logic Apps is that it's a meter consumption-based product. Running that flow one time only costs a hundredth of a cent, so 0.0001 cents per run. So it's inexpensive. You know, if you run it 100 times a day, it may cost you $60 a year. So it's not very expensive, right? But it's running under the Azure infrastructure. Power Automate and Logic Apps share the exact same backend. The front end is slightly different, but they do the exact same thing. If you are licensed for Power Automate Premium, or what's called per user plan now, or per workflow plan, you could just deploy it in Power Automate. It just costs a little bit more to do that. And of course, Teams, right? Teams is the place where we deploy the solution, where we host the Power Apps, right? And where we host the approval process as well. So all in all, what that illustrates to you is by using the Microsoft Teams toolset and the Microsoft 365 toolset, we can deliver a solution that uses that entire toolset, highly extensible, right? Can be deployed in probably a matter of a day or so, can be customized in 2 or 3 days, and will provide you with a great solution to manage your workspace. Of course, we're working on a lot of enhancements, right? One of them is the ability of providing Teams discovery, right, and browsing Teams, right? So one thing I didn't show and that we haven't enabled in our demonstration yet, but that we hear a lot is, I want to be able to classify my teams against a taxonomy, right? I have departments, I have locations, and I want to be able to tag my team so that I can see, show me all the teams for HR, or show me all the teams for my Boston office, right? And if they were categorized when you made a request, then with that team discovery capability, we'll be able to browse those. So we're working on that. We hope to have that released in the next week or so. Then, of course, advanced templating. We are using this solution internally at Witham, or we're deploying it with us. We have 1,400 people at Witham Smith & Brown, and obviously we have a team sprawl issue. So we're deploying that for our own use. And one thing that is important for us is that auto numbering. So there's cases where you want your teams to follow a convention that has a sequential number that can be done, or that will be able to be done. We are building some predefined templates. You probably should know that Microsoft is also going to deliver ready-made templates for teams in the next month or 2 months. So that will be able to be integrated here as well. And then there's a lot of time where you want a team's created and you say, you know, every time I create that team, I need those 20 people added automatically, right? I don't want to go through the list and add them automatically. They may be by, you know, if it's an HR team, we need to make sure the leadership is always included, etc. So you'll be able to have predefined owners and members, right? That gets automatically added in that templating process as well. So lots of ideas, and I'm sure hopefully you guys have more ideas that we could think about. So with that, we have a few minutes for questions. So I'm going to look here, and if you guys have more questions, you can obviously ask them. So a question that comes a lot is, Lamia, about change management. You know, what are the techniques that you've seen effective in driving adoption and change management?
I would say probably an impact assessment, right? So going back to what I referred to earlier, the people side of things, just really stressing on how is it going to impact, even if there's, let's say, a change in a Microsoft Teams feature, right? Just having that communication plan and impact assessment in place is really critical and has been important for our clients. So that definitely includes doing regular reviews with you, going through any like health reporting, looking at your entire Office 365 tenant. So, but in general, I would say at a high level, it would be from what I've seen, and important is impact analysis and assessments.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Another question here is how and where do you fit in the teamify of existing SharePoint site within this app, if this is possible? So for those of you that don't know what that means, if you've been using SharePoint for a while, if you remember 5 years ago, the collaboration space was, hey, let's create a SharePoint team site, right? And many of you probably have hundreds of team sites left over, right? So Microsoft has created a new process called teamification, i.e. making a SharePoint site a Microsoft Teams. Some of that tool set was released and is only available now through PowerShell. There'll be a user interface coming soon. You know, we're thinking it could be added here, right? You could have a request that looks at your list of SharePoint sites and say, I want to teamify this request, and upon approval, we'll run the background commands, right, or the background operation needed to transform your team. So that's a great idea, and I really appreciate that, because I think we haven't thought about that, but certainly can be added to the solution as well. Other question, what tools does Microsoft offer for performing e-discovery against Teams content? Great question. So when you think about Microsoft 365, e-discovery is a core component of the platform. And all the compliance feature, e-discovery being one of them, data loss prevention being other, content encryption being others, are available across the entire suite. So you're now able in the compliance center of Microsoft 365 to perform a full e-discovery, which includes content discovery, as well as potential content locking for potential matters directly from the compliance console. So if you're worried about compliance and e-discovery in Teams, not to be worried, it's available and available out of the box in the compliance center.
I'll take the next one. So Teams is already implemented, but we would like to implement governance plan. Can we go back to scratch? I would say here it's governance planning is an ever-breathing thing. It's not a one-time and done. And there are definitely different schools of thoughts of when you are starting from scratch, some key areas that need to be hit on, such as communication, that awareness aspect, and just like the what's in it for me factor. So we can definitely help you out with that, Marie. And yeah, just reach out. It's like I said, it's always breathing. It's ongoing.
It's always breathing, and it's not too late. I mean, without that question, because people say, "Oh my God, it's too late. I'm already, you know, into Teams. Why do I need governance?" Well, the question is, you will continue, and it's not too late to stop and say, "Let's put governance back in place. Let's think about who can create teams. How do we continuously train user, right? And how to do that." So not too late if you're already in Teams. Highly recommend it. We have time for a few more questions. So are there tools for discovering inactive, unused teams and deleting them? A great question. So Microsoft has implemented a process to make a team inactive, right? So a team that's not used will move out of your teams into a bucket. And then there are ability in the Teams Administration Center to see usage of Teams and not delete them, but archive them, right? And when they get archived, they stay there for a while and then they get deleted, right? So they are built-in process, but there's also a lot of third-party tools that have taken that to the extreme, right? Or to the next level, if I wish. So I'll recommend to first look at what's available inside the Microsoft Team Administration platform. Some may have a user interface, some may require a command like PowerShell or other commands, but it's available. You can detect them, and you can definitely archive them as well.
Yeah.
All right, so one more question. Can Teams implement AI for consulting firm? Well, yeah, I mean, the answer is Team is a great place to surface artificial intelligence. I mean, that's a loaded question, right? Because AI means a lot of things for a lot of different people. But one of the applied artificial intelligence that comes to Team is the concept of chatbots, right? This by itself requires a lot of governance. And the idea of providing AI-driven chatbot inside Team is a great idea, right? And we're seeing organizations that are maturing of their use of Teams coming back and saying, okay, let's now start introduce chatbot as a way to even drive more effectiveness and more adoption so that we can stop having people constantly asking questions in posts in Teams, send them to a bot that will handle, your 1,000 more use questions, and then allow people to collaborate. So a more self-service approach. So that's one of the way to use AI into Team as well.
And I'll say Teams has third-party apps that you can connect to. So there's like a Poly, which is like a survey generator, automated survey generator. And then there's also custom chatbots as well. So we definitely work with both areas.
Yeah. So one other very interesting question about a common issue around governance is when you use other platforms, Zoom, Google, etc., WebEx, and the like. If meeting presented by other organizations use those platforms, how do you work around that? There's a lot of additional capability in the Microsoft 365 platform. Some offered by Microsoft, they're additional. One is called Cloud App Security, which allow you to detect and protect and block access to other cloud app systems, to log access to those so that you can at least have some level of governance around it and auditing around access to those platforms. So Cloud App Security is the fit the product called Cloud Access Broker or CAS product, right? So that's Microsoft offers. There's obviously a lot of other companies that have tried to solve that, issues of blocking people to use non-approved products. So Microsoft has an offering, but you're going to rely on other third-party products or other products to solve that issue. Yeah, but it can be done. And a lot of organizations have implemented blocks lately on Zoom because, we've all known that a few months ago, there've been security concern, and there still are security concern with Zoom into sensitive environment, and some organizations are definitely blocking this. All right, so with that, this will conclude our questions. We appreciate all of you joining us today. We're here to help. If you like what you've seen today, if you want to talk to us, Lamia and I will send you an email. You can schedule a meeting with us. We'll be happy to share our thoughts, to show more of the solution we build, talk about your issues, and we hope that you find this useful. Thank you, Lamia, for sharing your expertise on change management. And everybody have a great day. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you. Stay safe.